The hour is at 7 o'clock. I call to order the meeting of the September 16th Planning and Zoning Board. We welcome all board members, to those who I've missed in the last 2 months, and I do apologize for missing the last meeting unexpectedly, and to all of our guests in the audience tonight. Do we have any excused absences or requests for excused absences?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, sir, we do have one excused request for an excused absence. Ms. Darlene Gardner's out of the country, so she did email me and ask for her excuse.
All right, we've got one request for excused absence. What is the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion we accept the excused absence.
Okay, have a motion to accept the excuse and second it.
Second.
Marty's already do it. All right, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next is the approval for the agenda for the September 16th meeting. Give you time to consider. Okay, it's been moved to approve the agenda for the September 16th meeting. Okay, moved in second. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? All right. You've had time to consider the minutes from the August meeting. This was sent in a packet earlier, and you've received those chance to review and make any suggestions or corrections as needed. Give you a chance to consider what is the pleasure of the board.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, the motion been made to approve the minutes from the August 12th meeting,
Second.
and it's seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next item of business, our new business. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our first action item on the agenda is the rezoning request you have in your packet. The property is owned by Janet Hare and Joan, I know I'm going to mess it up, Neitz, am I saying it right? Is that right? Nice, okay. All right, I knew I was going to mess it up. So just some site data for you. The applicant is Rocky Russell Development, LLC. This property is located out on Reedy Branch Road. That's south of its intersection with Davenport Farm Road. Parcel number there is 13889. It's 19.74 acres. Current zoning district is agricultural residential, and the proposed zoning is R6 conditional district. So per the application, the reason for the zoning change request is to allow development of a subdivision with construction of duplex residences. So there are conditions that the applicant has added as far as the conditional zoning, and they're up there on the board. I'll read them aloud. So the minimum lot dimension is 82 feet wide by 110 feet deep. They didn't put this in the application, but I took the liberty of doing the quick math on that. It's 9,020 square foot lots. So even though they're doing a R6 request, the minimum lot size out there will be just over 9,000 square feet. Number two, they'll have 1 and 2 story duplexes. Number three, they'll have brick or stone, and that will be placed on part of the front elevations, vinyl on the sides, rear, and partial front. 70% of the lots will have single car garages. The building square footage will not be less than 1,100 square feet per side, and an HOA will be established that will maintain, and that HOA will maintain all lawns. That will exclude any fenced-in backyards. That's pretty normal, and the entrance areas to the subdivision. So the adjacent property owners were mailed out notification of the rezoning request on August 28th, and a notification was posted on the site the same day. So here's your site, outlined in blue. There's Davenport Farm Road, Reedy Branch. So you can see this is the open door church and school here. So just an overlay of the rezoning map, so you can see it just reiterates it's just the property outlined in black there. So your current zoning, AR, agricultural residential. So you can see general business over here, office and institutional up here. So general business wraps around. This is all Greenville's jurisdiction here. So they're RA20. That's They're kind of low-density residential back here. Existing land use map. So it is vacant land out there, so it's cultivated. I think they're farming the land. But you can see there to the south of it, that's the school and church for the open door. So it's institutional. So there's a lot of institutional. There's the Seventh-day Adventist church there. Office and institutional up here with the community college, commercial out here. So this is the current comprehensive land use plan, the future land use plan. It designated as commercial residential transition. So per the comprehensive land use plan, commercial residential transition is a category that represents undeveloped areas which fits that criteria that adjoins or in close proximity to commercial, industrial, and/or office and institutional areas. Properties within this category may be suitable for a wide range of possible land uses, providing that such uses are appropriately located and arranged with respect to one another. So the general intent of this land use category is to provide for a gradual transition from higher intensity, which would be the commercial, from higher intensity uses along thoroughfares and adjacent to existing higher intensity uses and transitioning to lower intensity uses as you proceed away. So you can see, so you got commercial, which will be your high intensity, and it transitions from if you want to kind of visualize, you're kind of going downhill in density. So you actually have a little bit, intensity, and then you'll have residential behind us. So in light of the current land use plan that we have, the request does fit within the future land use plan that we currently have. So from a staff's perspective, we do recommend approval of the rezoning request. And I'll read the consistency statement. So planning staff finds the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed zoning district is compatible with surrounding land uses in the future land use plan. Staff recommends approval of the request to rezone the 19.74 acres from AR to R6 conditional use district. So the rezoning process, right now you guys will have the opportunity to entertain public comment. So you'll be able to hear from the applicant there in the attendance tonight, as well as those people who have been notified via mail or have seen the public posting. So they'll have an opportunity to give you their opinion on whether or not this is good or bad. After that, you guys will make a formal recommendation to town council, and the council will actually hear this in their November meeting, November 11th. It's actually November 12th. So before you open up public comments, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you guys have for me.
My first question is, in regards to, because we have a review of the comprehensive land use plan before us tonight as well.
Sure.
So in regards to its adoption and this particular request, is there any variances, or would the request be grandfathered in under the old future land use plan or the plan that will be adopted?
So there is legislation or statutory guidance on that, so it's called permit choice. Basically, the applicant has the ability, if they apply for, if their application is applied before new ordinance takes place or a new rule or new policy takes place, they have the option to go with the old or the new. So yeah, they can go. It would definitely go with the old if they choose to. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Brian, do you have any idea how long before DOT plans on making expansions down through there on those roads?
I don't. So the big question out there is probably the Fire Tower road extension. There's been speculation on where that line really exists or not. It did exist at one point in time on a map, but it's hard to find at this point. But from what I've been told, the environmental concerns of going to where they wanted to go, they were originally going to go kind of past the church, then like down, and it was going to come out toward South Central High School. But there's a big floodplain, stream, all that stuff down there, so it's environmentally sensitive areas that's going to cost a lot of money to do. So the realignment, there was another one that showed it actually coming down, kind of skirting behind the church, and then joining into where Reedy Branch ties into 4 lines, and that's where it would kind of come. But they've kind of backed off that now, especially now you've heard that the Old Tar widening project has been delayed. So I think DOT is a little strapped for money right now. So it'd probably be a long time coming. So there's no hard, fast plans. At the most, it was an arbitrary line on a map. No design concepts whatsoever.
Brian, have you seen a plat for how many units there would be?
For this development in
Yeah.
particular? No, sir. So I know they got some floodplain they contend with in the back. I think the rezoning request would give them the opportunity to move forward with the design concept. And that may be something the applicant can convey to you guys. But at this point, that's not something that we would technically require. If they would want to supply that, we would absolutely love to see it. So
Okay. Is there anything comparable in Winterville to what they're proposing?
I think probably your most comparable duplex neighborhood, well, you got Southridge down on NC 11, between Old L11 and NC 11. You've got Carroll Crossing. You've got some duplexes that are just out of our jurisdiction to the northeast where behind Sheets. I don't know if that's going to be comparable, but those are the best examples of duplex neighborhoods I can give you.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on what Tucker just brought up. I have a concern about how many dwellings are going to be in this. The reason, and you said it doesn't matter, but in the zoning ordinance on page 55, it says no multifamily development shall contain more than 20. And it goes on to talk about frontage of the road. And it references the thoroughfare plan. I don't have a copy of that, so has this been looked into to see that it meets this requirement?
Yes, so Reedy Branch is on the thoroughfare plan. It's a minor thoroughfare, not a major thoroughfare on but that thoroughfare plan is one that was done in 2004, but it is on the thoroughfare plan. So Reedy Branch is acknowledged there. As far as the design concept for what the zoning ordinance calls for the 20, they're talking about not particularly duplexes, but I think they're actually talking about townhomes that are connected more than two. So you're talking about row homes that would be like 9, 10 townhomes. Does that make sense? Multifamily would be the category of a townhome or apartment building or a condominium. So a duplex is just what we call an attached residential.
It just says multifamily, and a duplex is multifamily.
It gets, yeah. So I totally understand. I wrestle with it every day.
Another question I have, and this is one of the things that I like to bring up. In the conditions, I would like to see a condition added that the homeowners association maintain the retention bonds in a decent manner, or
So there'll be a
however you want.
BMP agreement between the town and the HOA. So that's going to be, that's already a requirement. That's not going to be something that they have to spell out there. So that'll be part of the actual subdivision process, the construction process. The HOA has to be established, and there has to be a BMP maintenance agreement. So those are already established policies in place. Go ahead.
The next concern I have, and again, we're going back to two comprehensive land use things here.
Yeah, and I caution let's try not to really get into the new one, because at this point, I don't have a plan that's adopted. I don't know what you guys are going to do, and I certainly don't know what council's going to do. So we really need to just kind of separate the two at this point in time. We're working with the old land use plan, and that's where we're at, and that's where I'm at from a staff's perspective. I have to look at that one, and I can't really look at. I'd love to, because I think it lends well for this kind of stuff, but at this point, I don't have that option. So I'd really caution you to try to stay away from that one as much as possible.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. At this time, we will hear from the developer if they want to speak on their behalf.
Let me pull those pictures up. Let me pull the pictures up. Oh, I got it. You want me to pull these pictures up? Sure. So you.
Thank you. Members of the board, thank you for this opportunity tonight. I'm the engineer for the project representing Rocky Russell, who would be the developer if this is passed.
Could you restate your name again, sir?
My name is Linwood Stroud, Stroud Engineering, representing the developer.
Thank
Picture Brian just posted on the screen is a sample of what the project would look like. We think it's a high-quality development. This area and the proposed conditions help to guarantee that it be well-maintained and be attractive and be an asset to the town of Winterville. This particular area, the area that's being developed on Reedy Branch Road, a lot of institutional, commercial, and that type of development. This is an ideal type of project to transition into lower intensity uses. We think it's probably one of the best locations in Greenville for this type of development. We think it's something that is needed in the town of Winterville. And we request your approval. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, and Mr. Russell's also here and may want to comment. You may have questions for him.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea how many residents or dwellings, single-family dwellings, or living areas would be in this approximately?
Well, we've got 19 acres. It's probably out of that 19, there may be, I don't know, 16 or so that may be developed, and with 9,000 square foot lots, by the time you consider the area that's taken up by the streets, et cetera, you're probably talking about maybe two and a half lots per acre, so that would be in the neighborhood of, I don't know, maybe 40 lots, which would be, and I'm just doing the calculation in my head right now, so I could be off. So you might be talking about as many as 80 living units on 40 lots that time, in that ballpark.
80? 80?
Don't hold me to that. 40, I'm saying possibly 40 duplexes, which would be 80 residences.
Any other questions for the developer from the board? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time we will entertain questions, concerns, or comments from the audience of those who've been notified about the rezoning. And to those who do elect to make comments, we ask that you speak clearly into the microphone and that we have board members that cannot hear clearly without you speaking.
Where they live, too.
I hope you won't talking to me because I can't hear you. But my name is Thomas Moy. I'm a member of Reedy Branch Church, and large group here from Reedy Branch Church. I'm here on behalf of the church on the corner of Reedy Branch Road and Davenport Farm Road. And we know this property is going to be developed. We don't have a problem with development. But the church would appreciate the board considering that be individual housing, single-family dwellings put on this property, and that from the corner down to the church on, can't even think of the name of the church now, but anyway, further down on Reedy Branch Road. So we would appreciate the board considering that that only single-family dwelling go there rather than condos or duplexes or whatever. We would like to see housing, single-family housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name's Kevin Little. I represent the James A. Little Limited Family Partnership. As far as what is being done, we are opposed to it as it is. We are about like the church. We prefer the BC bigger houses and all. Plus high density creates much more traffic on roads that are already full. And normally subdivisions like this, they deteriorate over time very quickly compared to bigger home subdivisions. But we're not opposed to development. I mean, we would respect bigger homes and all. May I speak for somebody else, please? It is the Mr. Jack Brinkley. He is the head of the H. Jenkins Family LLC, which is strictly adjacent to it. And he is opposed to it all the way around because it will probably decrease his property value as it is. If they had something better, he would consider it again.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rocky Russell. I am the applicant, and I'm a builder. I've been a resident of Pitt County since 1979, been a builder since 1994. I was one of the two original developers of Carroll Crossing. Jeff Tucker was my partner. When we set up that subdivision in like 2000, 2001, we formed a homeowners association. We tried to create an upper end duplex community. And I know I built probably half the homes in Carroll Crossing back then, and I sold those homes to a lot of police officers, retired, primarily older ladies, and there's a mixture of different people. There were very few investors in there. The houses were probably $15,000 or $20,000 higher than, some of the people that were building in Greenville, basically marketing to whoever wanted to buy one. Carroll Crossing, almost 20 years later, looks really good. My superintendent lives in one of those duplexes. I rode through there Saturday morning about 7 a.m. There were 2 highway patrolmen living in different areas, 2 deputy sheriffs living out there, and also 2 Pitt County deputies living in the community. And I'm sure there's a mixture of all kind of people out there. The homeowners association, I don't manage I have a property management business too. We manage about 50 HOAs. We manage Southridge, which is in your town. We manage Brook Green and Brookside. And but I don't manage Carroll Crossing, but I know it's a very vibrant community. There's a lot of homeowners involved in it. The community looks really nice. There's a lot of homeowners out there, and it offers an affordable choice for people. I've developed 2 other duplex communities since I started developing in 2000. Hampton Creek, which is right up the road on Davenport Farm Road, is less than a mile from this community. Those homes look similar to Carroll Crossing. And then a few years later, and I'm just finishing up a neighborhood on Allen Road near the hospital called Fieldstone, and that's what you see up here on the screen. And if I can hit the space bar, these are some of the homes in Fieldstone. When I developed Carroll Crossing, those homes were about $80,000 or $85,000. These homes are currently selling for about $160,000. So they're considered an entry-level home these days. But again, they're very desirable, and it's really a kind of a starter home for people. I'm also building single-family homes, and my starter homes are $200,000. I know that Winterville has been invaded by tract builders, and there's a lot of homes being put on the ground that are starter homes, probably up to about $300,000. So we don't have an oversupply in Pitt County, but there's a lot of competition in that single-family market, especially in the lower price range. And again, nobody is building a $160,000 single-family house because it's kind of hard to do that, if not impossible. The current market, the property on Reedy Branch Road, we went to planning and zoning and asked if what we wanted to do was it permissible. It's near a heavy industrial complex on 4 Lines Road, and you've got 2 or 3 churches there. So we thought it would make a great transition for something that, again, by the time I get this built, if I get the zoning, we're probably talking $170,000 per side home. There will be a homeowner association. The HOA will cut the grass. My company will initially manage it. I can't control it once the homeowners take over, but There will be a retention pond, most likely, and the HOA will have to maintain that as part of the discussions with the city, and it'd be totally their responsibility. The market demand in Pitt County is really good now. There's like a 2.5 month supply of everything. New construction, I think it's like 2.5 months. If y'all were here during the recession, that was probably 12 months or 18 months. So the market's really good. But as I mentioned earlier, there's been an invasion in Pitt County, and there's a lot of it in Winterville, tract builders that are putting a lot of single-family homes on the ground. And so it's a little bit tougher to compete against, a D.R. Horton or somebody like that. It's just tough for a small guy like myself who is a local builder. And that's about all I had to say, unless you have any other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. It says on here that one of the conditions is brick and stone. Is that going to be on all of them, or is that going to be on just a percentage of it?
It'll be on every one of them. Again, this is fieldstone. I mean, I don't know if would use brick or stone, but they would have this combination, probably these same elevations or some of these same elevations, but majority of them will have single car garages, because most people, and I'm selling most of the ones in fieldstone to young professionals that work at the hospital, and a large percentage are female, and they really like the garages for safety purposes. So the ones that I'm building that don't have garages are because the lots are so small I couldn't fit a garage, but I would rather have a garage because everybody wants that. It adds cost to the house, but it's very desirable. So.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are any of these gonna be rentals?
I can't control that, but again, these houses are going to sell for about $160,000, which would mean I also have a rental property management business. I have no plans to own any of these things, these homes for rental. Of course, that's just me saying that, but a $160,000 house, you'd have to rent it for $1,500 a month, and that's a pretty strong price for a duplex anywhere, even by the hospital. So it's not in Fieldstone, Carroll Crossing, it was not my market, because when Jeff Tucker and I developed that, our prices were higher than some of the lower end builders. So the majority of those homes were sold to individuals. Hampton Creek, which is a mile up the road, same thing. I didn't want renters in there, but I couldn't stop them. But due to the prices, they were not that attractive. And again, I'm looking at selling a $160,000 duplex. A lot of the homes in Winterville that are over probably 5 or 6 years old are probably in that same price range, single-family homes. And so I don't think it's that attractive for investors, because I'm not looking to build the cheapest home in town. So I want something that's going to be nice and represent my name well as the 3 duplex communities I've done so far, as well as all the communities I've done. I can't prevent it, but I'm trying to build a nice product that will attract owner-occupied individuals. So.
Right, well, my concern on asking about the rentals, they do look like nice homes up there, but rentals, they're moving in and out all the time. People they get in there. And that kind of brings the properties down. I know, I'll say, I know, because there's one beside me.
Right.
So-
And like I said, I manage 900 rental properties in Pitt County, and we probably have about 100 in Winterville, and most of them are single-family homes, most of them where people couldn't sell their home during the recession, and so they converted it to a rental. And I understand that you're right, there's more, people are moving more in and out, obviously, so.
Mr. Russell, I have a question. Typically in your duplex subdivisions, can you give us any idea of how much green space would be there? I know it probably has to do with the wetlands, but do you have any feeling for this piece of property, what percentage green space?
I don't know the percent. We have to get there is some land in the back this is probably going to be classified as wetlands, so we won't be able to do anything to that, not even mow cut the trees down. We're going to leave it alone. And the lots are about 9,000 square feet. I can't give you a percentage of the yard, but if again, you see there's one, that's a typical front yard in these duplexes. The backyards are probably 25 to 30 feet deep. They're not big, but again, basically my market is these people they're not mowing their own yards. If they want 2 acres to run their dog around, they need to go out to the county. Most people that live in these communities just want a home to live in, and so it's and again, the lot prices, for example, Fieldstone, my lot prices when I developed that in 2007 were $42,000. I anticipate these lots, if this zoning goes through, will probably be $60,000 for a duplex lot. So we can't afford to have 15,000 square foot lots. Even if I was up here for single family, all developers want to try to get the lot as small as possible just to reduce the cost of the home. Because if you keep raising the price of the home, people can't afford to buy it. Of course, depending on who you market, you're trying to market the home too.
A second question, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the only utilities that Winterville will be supplying is there'd be electric and there'd be water. Is there any other utilities out there like sewer?
Sewer is coming from GUC or?
There's no sewer there, is there?
Yeah, no, there's definitely sewer, yeah. I think it's actually our sewer, GUC water, and GUC electric.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to mention to y'all, I don't know if you thought about it or not,
Name?
but if you go to, my name's Gene Hemby, excuse me, is the fact, I was just doing some calculations then. Sorry, Hemby, H-E-M-B-Y, is if you go with high density properties in that way, with a neighborhood of three cars per house, times 2 houses, you're talking about 480 cars in that project. You already have a lot of problems with cars trying to come in and going to Pitt Community College. There's a shortcut down that road every morning. There's nothing you can do about that. If you go back to single-family homes, you cut it back, as far as single-family homes, you look back to maybe 160 cars. Everybody's going to be getting up at the same time in the morning to go to work. So you're talking about 400 cars coming out of that development, trying to get on a road that's already crowded. And I assume that Winterville Police would be patrolling it out that way, and you're already taxing them a whole lot more right now. But that's something you need to think about with going with high-density houses versus single-family houses.
My name is Judy Bowen, and I live at 535 Davenport Farm Road. My farm butts up to this suggested property for development, and I see the traffic on Davenport Farm Road every morning. My house sits back off the lane, but I am on the other side of Swift Creek, so I'm right past the bridge. And for about a 25 to 30 minute period in the morning, the traffic is backed up from Reedy Branch there at Reedy Branch Church to my home for a long period of time. Likewise, in the afternoons, when I travel home from work on the other end of Davenport Farm Road, when I get there, the traffic's backed up again. The traffic on Davenport Farm Road is a nightmare. And like Mr. Hemby said, I cannot imagine or fathom putting more traffic in that high-density area where you have a mega church open door. And for those of you that have ever attended there, if you're traveling back and forth to your church on Sunday morning, you have about a 15-minute wait for all of that traffic to gather in that same area. And I can't imagine having another development, and those people are trying to get in and out of the area in which they live. So my family goes on the record to say that we are definitely in opposition to this development.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Bowen. I'm Judy Bowen's husband. And I'll back up what she says. In the morning, we can hardly get out our driveway. It's backed up 3/4 of a mile. I don't have a problem either, as Reedy Branch said, with the property being developed. I do have an issue with when you say, like you said, 40 units, and then you're talking about 3 to 4 people per household with all the traffic and all the cars in there. I know sometime back, a few years back, they had there was a rumor or something come out about that they would close the road that runs down behind Pitt Community College, eventually closing that road. So what happens at that point in time if they decide to close that road off from Reedy Branch up to the stoplight where traffic can't go through there? And then we keep adding all this traffic in that particular corner. So that is my concern, if they close that road and all the traffic that is on there.
Thank you.
My name is Graydon Tripp. I live at 105 Marion Drive in Greenville. I own the property that adjoins Kevin Little's land that he has already talked to you about. I am opposed to this proposal as it currently stands. It was characterized to me as being low-income development. I do not think that's what we need out in this area, and I would certainly like to see at least medium to upper income development on this property on Reedy Branch Road. And therefore, I am opposed to the proposal as it currently stands.
My name is Janet Hare. I am one of the owners of the property. This area was owned by my mother and father. I grew up in this neighborhood. I've been a member of Reedy Branch Church. I appreciate everyone's concerns. I think a lot of valid points have been brought up, especially about traffic. It amazes me how much Winterville and Greenville has grown. I live in Virginia Beach. It's just mind-boggling. However, when we talk about single-family homes, when you look at coming from 4 lines, it's all industrial. There is nothing but industrial. It looks terrible. I can't even tell you. I'm so disappointed that the Braxton family and the city of Winterville allowed that kind of development to occur. And then we have the churches. There are 2 churches coming up Reedy Branch Road, and I can see with these mega churches, you know, all this traffic. It seems like traffic in Greenville and in Winterville is a problem, not just on Reedy Branch Road and not just on Davenport Farm Road. So when you're looking at development, do you think a single-family home, a nice single-family home, is going to be wanting to be beside a mega church? I know that I wouldn't want to buy that. And it seems to me that what Rocky Russell is proposing is not low-cost housing. It's very nice housing. And we need to provide to the community all levels of affordable housing. So I think what Rocky is proposing is a nice transition coming up Reedy Branch Road, up those 2 churches, and this 19 acres of land for housing that I can't imagine having 3 cars per home. That's pretty, to me, I mean, I have 2 teenagers and my husband, and we have 3 cars between the 4 of us. So to live in a small house like that and you have 3 cars, that just doesn't seem right to me. So I think we're looking at, one, what is the transportation problem in our community? How are we going to solve that? And then how does adding this type of community add to that? And that's the whole big thing in zoning and planning that we all have to think about. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Hi, again, Rocky Russell. I like that. I'm assuming planning and zoning has traffic counts that they can provide you that I guess gives you statistical numbers for what it would be, because And of course, I don't have hard numbers, and most of the time when I go to planning and zoning meetings, the planning staff give you it's 2 cars per person per trip per day, whatever their numbers are. But, most of the people that are buying my Fieldstone, and there's another community near the Allen Road called Brook Hollow. Most of those majority are single white or single black female that work at the hospital. And they probably get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whatever. And so there are probably 2 cars, but I manage Fieldstone, HOA. My daughter just sold her, she's selling her house in Fieldstone. She lived by herself. If there may be 3 cars in a couple of driveways, but it's kind of tight. So it's usually 1 or 2 people living in those, primarily 1. And regarding to the prices, these are going to be $150,000, $160,000, $70,000 homes. That's not low-income housing. It's going to be, I'm trying to attract people that work at the medical school, the hospital, to buy these homes. I'm not looking to turn it to the proverbial Section 8 neighborhood. That's not what it's going to be. If an investor buys a building, his rent prices, as I mentioned to you, Ms. Crawford, are going to be $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 a month. That's somebody's making some serious money to have to afford that kind of rent. But thank you.
And just to keep in mind that the issue before this planning and zoning board is the issue of rezoning in regards to the plat, lot sizes, and those particular things would be a matter which would come before us once a plat is presented. This planning board acts as counsel or advisory to the town council, though our decision is only that of to approve or not to approve. The action and decisions regarding the rezoning issue would be that of Winterville Town Council.
Hi, my name is Joan Knights, formerly Little, and my sister and I own the piece of property. Everybody here, and I want to reiterate that I agree with everything she says. However, I want to look to the future. You've got the bypass coming in. People are going to be coming down 4 lines and not so much the Davenport Farm Road. They'll just come down 4 lines and zip up into their homes. You're talking about the highway that's going to go through to hook up to Fire Tower. There's a lot of things that are in the works, but they're in the future. And I know that the road itself is close to being opened because I watch it all the time. I live in Winterville, and I have lived most of my life here. And I'm very positive about this because I think it is a place to start where the bigger farms that are around can go into the larger land lots and the larger homes. And like Rocky said, I don't believe that this is going to be a low-income home. I think it's going to have a lot of people wanting to be down in this area once the bypass gets open from the people at the hospital, the people that work at the hospital, because that is one of our major employers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Brittany O'Neill, and I was not dressed for this evening, but I thank you guys for letting us come out tonight. I have been a Winterville resident my entire life, and I am very passionate about the town of Winterville. I went away to Campbell, and I did everything that I could to come back home. I love the Watermelon Festival. I love the way that I grew up. I grew up on Davenport Farm Road, and it was our home, it was Woodridge, and then the older ranch homes down on the road. And with all that being said, I've lived here my whole life, and growing up, we do have these new churches, and the traffic is absolutely terrible. I came home from my home church on Sunday, and I grew up when there wasn't a 4-way stop on every single corner in Winterville, and you guys know what I'm talking about. And then people don't know how to drive at those four-way stops. Not to mention that. But, you know, not only are we having traffic being directed in front of Open Door, now we also had traffic, you know, being directed in front of Reedy Branch to keep people safe. So in regards to the Southwest Bypass, we don't know what that's going to be like. But I personally believe I'm in opposition to this. Winterville has enough development as it is, especially on Davenport, because I've watched it through the years, and I oppose this movement. Thank you.
If there are no other comments, at this time we will close this session to have the board consider the matter before us, the rezoning of the Hare Knights property. What is the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion that we deny the request.
I second.
Okay, the motion has been moved to deny the request for rezoning and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Nay. Okay, request to the council is denied. Next item, the comprehensive use land plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll let everybody kind of clear out before we get started on this. Thank you. Not everybody signed it. But I think is that yours? Oh, it's over here. You ready? All right. All right, so moving on to probably our more lengthy discussion tonight is going to be our comprehensive land use plan, the development of our new plan. So as you guys know, we've been working on this for over a year. We've established a steering committee. We've met over 5 times. We met 5 times with the steering committee. I think we've got a really, really good plan for you to guys to look at. So I know we've talked about kind of giving you guys the ins and outs of this plan. So I really just want to, we probably want to do, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. I don't want to get, so I want you guys to feel comfortable at the end of this to have a good understanding of this plan. Not necessarily know every detail. That's what you depend on me for. That's what you depend on the steering committee to provide for. That's what you depend on the consultants that the town's hired to come in and actually develop this plan. So I really just want you to feel comfortable, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll have a recommendation. But like I said, we're going to kind of settle in just a little bit. Jake Petrowski is the project manager with Stewart. He's going to come up and kind of give you our overall of the plan, and then we'll go through any questions you guys have. Before we do that, I just want to give you guys the background. Why do we do this stuff? I think we've probably done it in the past, but it's always good to hear again. It's always good for me to hear. So a comprehensive land use plan, what is that? I think you guys know the general concept of it, but the purpose of it is to guide the future actions of the town. This will be the backbone of all our planning operations. So anytime we have, just like the request we just had, we'll go to the plan, we'll compare it, make sure it lines up. If it doesn't, staff will let you know either way. So, but it does prevent, other than the future land use plan component of it, it presents a vision for the future of the town. So it actually is going to project goals, project visions, kind of give a whole statement of where we think we're going as a town. So, and this is going to get those long range goals of how to get there. So from your standpoint, it's going to give you a tool to approve or deny development plans. It's going to help us pursue investment in transportation infrastructure. So it's going to help us see where we fall short in that infrastructure. It's going to help us to to find spots to build facilities, such as a big topic for town council's got to consider right now is a Parks and Recs center. So we're looking at trying to do one of those. So this plan would help us kind of narrow down where those sites would go. And then it would obviously help us give our infrastructure, water, electric, sewer, where we want to serve, where we want growth to go, where we want to guide that growth to go. That's obviously a big part of our development. You've got to have the infrastructure there to serve that property. So, when the town's got that there, it makes it really easy for developers to come in, to invest in our community and to put a good product on the ground. And then it allows us to update our code language. So, and when I say that, I'm talking about our actual zoning code and our subdivision ordinance and all that good stuff. So just to give you a kind of idea of where we're at. So like I said, we've been doing this about a year. So the steering committee, our meeting last week, did unanimously give us an endorsement of the plan with some modifications. There were a few minor modifications that needed to be made. Jake will talk about that a little bit in a second. So tonight, hopefully by the end of this discussion, we can garner a favorable recommendation from you guys. And then in October, town council is going to hear it and entertain a public hearing and then vote accordingly. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jake, unless you guys got any questions for me right now.
So at the conclusion of this, you're asking that we consider or vote on this to be presented to the town council?
If the board feels comfortable enough to give a favorable recommendation, that's my hopes tonight. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir.
Brian, excuse me, is this basically the same as the meeting? This information is the meeting we had some time back?
So you're talking about the public? So it's going to be, so those meetings were geared toward getting public input. So I think it was geared toward kind of an education component to the public that we had in attendance, but it was of informational purpose. So it'll be kind of that same kind of the same field, but I think it's a little bit more of a deep dive. Yeah, so sort of, I guess is the good answer. But it's going to be, obviously, this is our end final draft product, so as opposed to trying to garner information to develop this plan, this is what we've actually developed, and this is where we're at for hopefully the final draft version. We may add a couple little tweaks to it, depending on what you guys feel like tonight, but for the most part, this is our final draft. So, yeah, go ahead.
And it's very similar to what we've presented all along. Some of this stuff we developed in February, and we've refined it since then. And then our second public meeting this summer, we also had a lot of the material, a lot of the recommendations in draft form at that point. And based on staff's recommendation and also the steering committee recommendation, there were some modifications since that last public meeting. But some of the recommendations remain the same. So I have a short presentation that'll provide an overview of the plan. We're not going to go into every page and every recommendation, but at the end, if you do have an issue you're concerned about and you want to know more information, definitely ask, and we can kind of talk through some of those particulars and our opinion on whether that topic is addressed adequately or not. And at the end of the day, you are going to be using this document on a monthly basis, weekly basis. So we want to make sure that it addresses those concerns, and you could endorse with some changes too. That's also an option. So the schedule, this has been about a year-long process. We began in the fall of last year, did a lot of data gathering and analysis, a lot of public engagement, and developed the plan over the last couple months. Some of the public involvement it kind of began in February, but then it also kind of culminated in a public meeting recently in July. But the February timeframe and into March was the public meetings, the work session, the charrette, that was really a series of public meetings. We had a downtown walking tour and an open house and coffee talk at the depot, and also a survey during that period where we got 330 responses, which is a really good turnout for the size of your town. And then also that public meeting. Some of the things we heard was encouraging additional non-residential development, so not just residential development, managing growth, and taking advantage of kind of what we have in terms of town. The town does have a limited growth area. When you start looking at the north, there's Greenville. To the south, there's Ayden. To the west is Renton, and you have different utility providers. So we really need to make some smart decisions over the next 10 years or so, because it could be a very realistic reality that in 10 years, Winterville is mostly built out. And we're not going to get a chance to revisit decisions that we make on rezonings or development approvals or where we put things in terms of town infrastructure. So we really need to be methodical about what we do in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. Infrastructure and service improvements, quality of residential was a really hot topic. But also we did hear a lot about housing options as well. So the need for housing options that appeal to seniors and young families. And we asked a lot about kind of what types of housing people wanted, but also what makes quality residential. So, one of the things that we heard is when we asked what type of housing you're interested in, the majority of folks, the largest majority of folks, wanted a house with a large yard. 81% of respondents said that. And that's really a lot of what you have on the market right now in terms of, development over the last 10 years. Yes, there has been, a duplex neighborhood or some other smaller format products, but by and large, it's been that house with a large yard. But increasingly, we are seeing a demand for different types of options, like a house with a smaller yard, especially if it's within walking distance of shopping, or has some community open space or parks, that sort of thing, or a low maintenance patio home or townhome that's near shopping and services. Those were also popular kind of responses. We asked about your preference. We showed folks a bunch of different images of residential and got them to respond which ones they really liked. The top preference was the top left, which was a house on a smaller lot, but it had a front porch, and it had some quality building materials, nice landscaping, sidewalks, street trees, that sort of thing. Whereas apartments were preferred less, but half the people either were in favor or didn't object to it. But that house in the top left was the most preferred. So we also asked what factors are important in establishing and maintaining residential neighborhood quality. And this is really important for you all because you're faced with rezoning decisions on a monthly basis. So to the degree that you all can influence and move the needle on things that people really want to see in quality residential neighborhoods, that's really important. So the top 3 things that were mentioned were sidewalks. And sidewalks are required at least on one side in most residential districts, but there's a really big priority for sidewalks. So, thinking about how we can get sidewalks on both sides in some neighborhoods, especially when it's higher density or smaller lots, that's important. Greenways, trails, and green space. Parks, and that's not just the remainder of the property. So not just the wetlands and the floodplain that you can't really use, but this is actually usable green space, place where you can go walk your dog or go jogging or take your son or daughter and go play frisbee or go play soccer, that sort of thing. To the degree that you can get those in new developments is really beneficial because it lowers the burden on the town in providing all those resources. So that's also important. Landscaping and beautification is also something that was mentioned. That could be entryways and buffer yards in the front. So what you see on roadways, you don't necessarily see the backs of homes and that sort of thing. But it also could be along streets. So it could be these street trees or yard trees. All these things really can translate well into conditions that you suggest or try to put on things that rezonings that are trying to go to a smaller lot size or something like that. These are the things that I would really suggest you focus on because these are the things that people said that they wanted. So overall in the plan, there's a lot of different recommendations. They're really tied to this vision and a set of goals here. So the vision that we came up with, it was really based on people that came to the public meeting, participated in envisioning exercises, told us what their vision for Winterville was. We worked with the steering committee. We worked on kind of summarizing responses from the survey. And basically, it was all tied to these slices of the good life. So what are those slices of the good life, and how can we support that? So balanced, planned, and purposeful growth, the small town atmosphere, parks and amenities that support families of all ages, providing an opportunity for safe, healthy lifestyles. Safety was mentioned a lot. The low crime in Winterville was mentioned a lot. These are some of those things that represents. Attractive, livable, and unique. The town is a welcoming place for businesses, residents, and visitors alike. So that's kind of a working vision statement of what we're trying to reinforce about the town and create in the future. A couple of the goals that we came up with, and all the recommendations that follow are really tied to one of these goals. Creating a town-wide identity or reinforcing that. So, you all are different than kind of the rest of Pitt County. And we want to make sure when people come to Winterville, they know they're in Winterville. So that comes down to, what the streets look like, what the developments look like, and what town facilities look like. Are there, signage and visually appealing building streetscapes and public spaces. All that kind of ties to the image of Winterville. Strengthen and diversify the economy. Your tax base is more diverse than some towns your size. You have some commercial tax base, which is great, but we are still reliant a lot on residential tax base. So diversifying that is important. Getting jobs locally is important. Connectivity and mobility. And getting people around. We heard a lot of citizens earlier talking about mobility issues, like getting around in their neighborhood during certain times. So making sure that we have neighborhoods that connect to multiple streets and multiple outlets, and requiring improvements for certain higher intensity developments is important. Healthy neighborhoods and the environment, and then also activating downtown. You all have made a lot of strides downtown, but we want to continue to support that. Central to this plan is a new draft future land use map. So this would replace the map that Brian was showing earlier. That map had some good ideas, and it served you well. What we wanted to do is take a little bit more detailed look at it and redefine some of our recommendations for the overall pattern of growth in town. And this is what would replace that map, and you would use in rezoning decisions and infrastructure and investment decisions moving forward. Some of the things that we did with this is really clarify some of those transitional areas. You had a large area that was that commercial residential transition zone on kind of the Reedy Branch area, and we segmented that into, okay, this really should be commercial or mixed use areas, and this area should be mostly residential areas. We also have kind of some clarity on the in the residential side of things. In this area over here. So on the residential side of things, there's an area that's the yellow that is the suburban residential area that really is your growth area. That's where you're going to get most of your new residential subdivisions and most of the growth in the future of Winterville. And that area is likely can be served by utilities, primarily water and sewer. But then you have an area that's a little bit outside of that is the kind of the rural residential area that we're saying, this is really going to be, probably mostly county jurisdiction. We're probably not going to serve that with utilities, at least in the time horizon of this plan, which is about 10 years. And then there's some other areas, kind of the tangerine or orange color, that is meant to be where you can have a little bit more mix, a little bit smaller lot sizes, but that comes with design standards. Design is such an important thing, and when it comes to the way the future development looks in your community, and how it holds value, and also how you reduce impacts on adjacent property owners, people that have been in town for a while or don't know what they want to do yet with their property. So some of the things that we wanted to do with this plan was really talk about some of the design differences between these different character areas. So I'd like to go through a few of those with you today. And this is kind of the overall character area recommendations on page 45. I won't read these in detail, but basically it goes from less intense to a little bit more intense. We have kind of the rural residential area where we're really looking at development on well and septic for the most part, larger, very large lots. Really the gross density of this area is meant to be over or like under 1 dwelling unit per acre. And that's probably largely governed by just the presence or lack of utilities. And then we have the suburban residential area, which is really where, you know, this yellow area where the bulk of your growth will occur. And we made some recommendations about kind of design in this area. You know, gross density of 1 to 3 acres. We really want curb and gutter. We want sidewalk at least on one side. We want open space. Again, not just the regulated features, but actually usable open space that can really help this fit in and be that transition between the more developed area of Winterville and really the rural area of Winterville and an existing development that's out there that's pretty low density. One of the key recommendations in that low density area and also applicable in the urban neighborhood is open space. You know, right now you don't have really requirements for open space in a lot of your zoning districts. This is something that can be really helpful in making a transition between uses and also increasing the value and really elevating the design of residential subdivisions. So amenities and open space is what's really going to help neighborhoods in Winterville hold their value, but also compete with neighborhoods that are elsewhere in the county and that sort of thing. This graphic here shows 2 different options for a subdivision. It's a hypothetical subdivision, not in reality yet, but you know, both of these subdivisions have 130 lots. But the one on the left has trails, it has green space, and not just floodplain or a regulated stream buffer that's reserved. So this is something that we're saying, you know, if you are going to allow smaller lots, then it can be in exchange for something, and requiring more open space might be how you balance those two. The market really wants to go to smaller lots. It wants to go to duplexes, and there's a real need for this missing middle housing type and more affordable housing type. But in order to keep the value and the appeal of that subdivision and make it fit in Winterville, you might want to look at requiring more open space.
Can I ask you a question about urban neighborhood? Excuse me, urban neighborhood because the property tonight we were talking about is currently urban neighborhood, but it's also close to a commercial center. And as soon as the bypass comes in, 4 lines, it's going to be, you know, it's going to come off the bypass and coming in. Is this new plan, is it going, are you going to be picking and choosing areas more specific than this old map? Is that the goal?
I mean, we did kind of clarify.
Is this the suggestion? Okay.
That's the suggestion, but and I think I'd like to, you know, I can touch on that a little bit. You know, one of the things that this plan does is establish, you know, kind of overall kind of land use patterns. So if you look at overall land use patterns, the gross density of that proposal wasn't that far off. You know, it was about
it was Winterville definitely needs stuff like that, but maybe not in that area.
And the design of that is also something that, you know, this plan doesn't necessarily support as it was currently proposed in the level of detail we knew right now.
Because once you open it up in that area, because there's nothing there right now, all the development is further down Reedy Branch. But once you come and bring something, then you're opening it up in an area that could potentially be a more commercial area because it's between the community college and the industrial zone.
Yeah, well,
you kind of don't want people living sandwiched in between it.
There's a couple policies
wish I could've
that,
said more about
that
that.
kind of guide that growth in that area. One is kind of this idea of logical progression and leapfrogging. So ideally, you would have kind of growth from the commercial area and from the community college southward, or from key intersections outward. Another thing, a couple policies in here that are important is, in the urban neighborhood, there's recommendations for 5 or 10% open space. There's a recommendation for street trees. There's a recommendation for sidewalks on both sides of the road. Those things would help make that neighborhood fit a little bit better in the context, because there's single-family neighborhoods all around. And there's also, some language in here about, fitting into the context of a subdivision. So, one way to do it is if Davenport and Reedy Branch is going to be more commercial in the future, could we see a transition, maybe 2 housing types on that piece of land? Maybe there's duplexes or townhomes in the front of it, but maybe there's some single-family homes in the back of it where you get farther away from that key intersection. That's the kind of thing that this would support, a nuanced version of that. And some of those policies are baked in here, and that's what we're trying to do, is kind of think about, the design of things and how they fit in. So this is kind of the character area for urban neighborhoods. So you'll see that there's some, mostly single-family homes. There are some, allowances for smaller scale attached product, but they come with design criteria. We really want that to be in the right place. We really want it to be designed well to hold value. And we really want to think about, alley loading different higher density or smaller lot stuff, to where you have a clean front. Maybe you can put a front porch out there, you can put street trees out there, and you don't see just garages when you go down the street. So I think thinking about the way things look in their finished state is going to be really important. How can we make it look like the best parts of Winterville in 20 years? That's really what we're going for. So if you go over here to A.G. Cox and drive around the old neighborhoods, and you'll see trees on the street, you'll see sidewalks, you'll see front porches. Those are the kinds of things we want to see in Winterville in the long term. So how can we get more of that? And it might be you allow some smaller lots, but it's with something. You get something out of it. You get something that you can point to out of it. So that's really what we're trying to do in that urban neighborhood, is replicate some of the best places in Winterville. In some cases, it might be smaller lots. Some cases, it might be townhomes. But then we have a transition as we go farther out. A couple other things that we have is just different kinds of commercial areas. We're really classifying commercial areas that we're recommending in the future land use plan. A neighborhood center, which is more smaller scale. Maybe you have a grocery store and some smaller scale retail. We have a mixed use center that's really planned around Main Street and 11 on the west side of town. That's kind of a little bit different than what you have over up north at Beacon Drive, which is really more a regional center where you have a regional draw to that, and it's really more your heavy, your more intense commercial and mixed-use area. And this would also be a place where you'd want to see, a mix of housing types. These commercial areas, maybe it's duplexes, or maybe it's townhomes, or maybe it's some small-scale apartment complexes. But we're trying to give some guidance on that as well. The closer to these things, the more intense the residential should be, and then when you go farther away, it should go to more single-family homes. One of the things we spent a lot of time on was the downtown area. You have kind of an intact couple blocks near Railroad Street, but we really see a lot of potential there. And you've already started this. You have some restaurants, you've had some in the past, and you have some new ones coming, which is exciting. But we want to build on that, and that's really the eastern part of downtown. And then you have kind of this West Main area, which is that area near Main and Mill, kind of west over to NC 11. And then you have this gateway area that is largely undeveloped. That's over by NC 11. In West Main. And we think that each of these places, each of these parts of your downtown have a lot of different opportunity. And we've really spent some time talking about some of the some of the big things that can happen that could be driven by public actions, but also could be encouraged on the private side in this area. So in kind of the traditional downtown area that's really centered around Main and Mill and over to Railroad Street and a little bit south to say Blunt, we really see the opportunity for some infill and redevelopment of some surface parking lots or some vacant lots that could be mixed-use buildings. So that could be, 2 or 3-story mixed-use buildings with a mix of residential and then retail or office on the bottom. And some of those might be more near-term, some of it might be more long-term, but that really could help reinforce downtown. You kind of have a informal green, common town green, which is where Market on the Square is now. If you could formalize that a little bit, and that's adding some more park-like features. Maybe it's some parking. Maybe it's some internal pathways, benches, some other programming to give people a reason to go there during the day, not just during events. That could be something that would really help kind of anchor your downtown. And then as you kind of fade to the northwest and points west, you could have some attached and detached residential as infill, again, if it meets that design criteria that we're really wanting to reinforce. As we go into kind of West Main Street over farther to the west, you can continue to see some of that mix of residential, and you have some bigger pieces of land, so you could do some residential that's really walking distance or golf carting distance to downtown, which is pretty exciting. You would want to keep a scale that fits your downtown. We wouldn't suggest too much larger format things, but that would be a good place for a mix of residential. And then also on West Main itself, we could see some of the buildings that are in need of repair and renovation. Some of those could go to commercial or office, so you can really extend your downtown farther to the west. And we've seen that be successful in other towns. And sometimes older homes, they really need renovation, and if you allow some of more lower intensity, could be restaurants or small scale offices, that sort of thing, that could fit in that neighborhood while encouraging reinvestment. And then you do have some office and employment industrial uses to the south that we want to kind of make room for as well. Farther to the west, the Gateway and new commercial area centered around West Main or NC 903 and NC 11. This is where you could have some landscaping or some gateway signage. You already have some on the southwest or southeast quadrant that could be kind of enhanced a little bit. You would want to take advantage of this area as having access on NC 11, but you might want to encourage a slightly different design than what you have farther north at Beacon Drive and that sort of thing. So making sure that new development kind of reflects the character of Winterville and downtown, what could be an extension of downtown Winterville. So thinking about the way the design of buildings occurs, hiding parking, thinking about that edge of NC 11, and this is kind of a conceptual design, but it gives you something to think about when you have a rezoning before you. But commercial, there could be an opportunity for some higher density residential here as well, but this could be a gateway to your town. It already is a gateway. Right now it's just undeveloped. So thinking about what it looks like in the future is really important. We've made a lot of other recommendations too related to economic development that really is meant to kind of address some of the things that we've already talked about, like retail leakage and balancing the tax base, business recruitment and retention, reinforcing the town's identity as a family-friendly community, but also promoting retirement-focused living. You are our certified retirement community with the state of North Carolina. I don't, you're not going to be as big as the villages, Florida or anything. There's 45, 50,000 people there. But some of the aspects of that we really kind of like. The fact that they have a main street that is nice to walk on. People drive golf carts there, and it really is it's kind of a hub of activity. And it still feels like a good scale that's not too big, and you kind of have that small town feel that you have here. So,
can you get some more clarifying as to retail leakage? What was that?
Oh, that's just you all do a pretty good job of capturing retail dollars from people driving through Winterville or coming to Winterville to spend money, or people that live here spending money in the town. But you do have some retail leakage, which means retail dollars being spent outside of your town. And largely it's driven by where people spend their days. A lot of people work in Greenville. A lot of people work at the hospital or the university. So you got to think they're going to stop in Greenville on their way home. They're going to grab food. They're going to eat out at lunch. That's some of that leakage that could be coming to your town, could be coming to your tax rolls and your sales tax. So to the degree that you can get increase your daytime population, so people that either work here or don't work and live here all day long, or the degree that you can build retail developments and places that people are attracted to. And downtown could be one of them. The western part of downtown could be one of them. But how can you capture more retail from people that are spending their dollars elsewhere? So, greenways and pedestrian facilities. We did make some recommendations, slightly. Making some recommendations that were building on your greenway plan that you already have, also identifying some primary pedestrian corridors. There was a lot of talk about sidewalks, not just in what makes a quality neighborhood. There was actually a lot of people that came and said, I really want a sidewalk on the north side of Main Street. I really need a better crossing of Tar Road, Old Tar Road, and the people really want to see some enhancements down by the recreation park and by the middle school. So, there's a lot of folks that really want to see some priorities be addressed in terms of sidewalks and ways to get around, not just in the car. So that's really what we focused on here with some logical phasing recommendations. Also talked about some parks as well. I don't have a slide for that, but we talked about some park recommendations. Downtown specifically, there were some things that we wanted to see addressed and added some recommendations in the plan. The crossing of Main and Mill, for it being your center of your town, it's not really conducive to pedestrian travel. It's people go really fast, and there's not really a crosswalk or a crossing signal, which would be really beneficial in the long run. Also, West Main Street improvements, you've restriped some of that to add more parking. That could continue to the south and north as well. So that whole railroad corridor, there's a lot of opportunity in making that area of town work better for your town. And we've added some short-term, long-term stuff, some of which you've already done. Other transportation recommendations. Address problematic intersections. There's a couple intersections that have higher crash rates and just need to be addressed, and some of those could be you could add turn lanes, you can fix the geometry, you could add work with the Department of Transportation and get traffic lights. There's a number of things you can do for those. The other thing you want to do is manage access on high volume roads. So you have a thoroughfare plan that could be updated, but it identifies some areas that are really crucial to your town, and making sure there's not a lot of driveways on those, consolidating access on those, and preserving as much capacity on those as you can is important. And also encouraging connectivity. collector streets or smaller roads that really collects traffic from a neighborhood and distribute it to different main thoroughfares can really help manage traffic on those main roads. Right now, I mean, between NC-11 and Reedy Branch, all the way south of town, all the way up, you have a lot of undeveloped land. And one of the things that you want to do when you get development proposals there is make sure that there's connections in that new development to where there's not a one-way in, one-way out situation, and you're potentially causing some issues with EMS response or something like that in case there's a traffic jam or in case there is a fire or something like that. Getting multiple connections in and out, especially higher density developments, is really important, or even medium density developments. If you're developing very low density subdivisions, 1 unit per acre or half acre lots, connections are less important. But once you start getting, down to 15,000 square foot lot, 9,000, 8,000 square foot lots and lower, you really need to have a more traditional grid that really has multiple ways to get in and get out. And it doesn't have to look like downtown, but there has to be multiple connections. There shouldn't be a lot of cul-de-sacs because people are going to want to walk places, and emergency response is going to want to get in there and get out. So thinking about your standards related to connectivity and having it dovetail with your zoning a little bit better than it does now. You have some stuff in there that discourages long cul-de-sacs and that sort of thing, but we're making some recommendations on tuning those up a little bit. This is just a graphic of your downtown, and a lot of these subdivisions were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and we really didn't appreciate the benefit of connectivity as much as we do now. But all those pink dots are cul-de-sacs. So some of those neighborhoods have a really hard time getting anywhere by walking because they have to go out to a main road and go all the way around their elbow to get to anything. So thinking about how to, one might be, working with some of those neighborhoods and addressing some of those lack of connections. And you've done some of that at Hillcrest Park. There's a walkway to the park at the end of a cul-de-sac. But some of those neighborhoods might really want to work with the town on addressing some of those connections, but also just not making those same mistakes in the future as we develop new subdivisions moving forward. Public services, we work with fire and EMS and talked with them a lot. There's a lot of questions about, where to position fire in the future or in police. They're both sharing a building and they're both running out of space, or already ran out of space really. But thinking about, moving police or fire and EMS or additional satellite stations to maintain or improve response times is something that you're going to have to be thinking about as a town in the very near future. And we looked at kind of east versus west, so using the railroad as a dividing line, and really just ran some numbers and to understand what number of households and jobs are served on what now and in the future based on our land use recommendations. So in the east, there's more existing population and there's housing potential there. So growth potential, there's a little bit more in the east, but there's a lot more out there right now in the east. Whereas the west, there's more workers, more daytime population, or actually just more workers. There's still more daytime population on the east. But we gave these numbers, we gave a whole spreadsheet of numbers to police and fire and EMS so that they just have that as a point of reference when as they start to think about what their future is and that sort of thing. But you're going to need to make a move and do something to kind of maintain service. But we wanted to provide some numbers for that. So, that's all in terms of the presentation I have. Again, we can kind of talk about particular concerns or topics and what's in the plan related to it. But I wanted to give you kind of that brief overview. Really, this month was working with staff and reviewing the draft plan, and we had the steering committee number 5, which they endorsed with some changes, the plan, and then we're here at the planning board, and we want to have some discussion with you all, and then eventually move forward to town council. So I'll take any questions. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
Just a statement, and I think the plan is reflective. I was part of the Southeast Bypass group, and when we had all the townships here, Winterville was consistent in just the idea of not just only first-time home buyers, but second-time home buyers, some of the larger things. So I think the plan is very consistent with what I heard back then, compared to Greenville, which wanted more higher density, Aden, who's trying to get people to come in.
Yeah, and I think what we try to do with that is we know there's a demand for different types of housing and different stages of life. What we try to do is identify where those things are appropriate, and also some design steps that you can do, some design criteria and guidelines that could be used through a conditional rezoning process or through updating your zoning code to just make sure you get the highest quality product possible.
Mr. Chairman, three of us, Darlene Gardner was not here tonight. Myself and Mrs. Roberson have served on this committee from the beginning. And Brian will attest to the fact that I'm not an easy pushover in the meetings, which you all know I'll voice an opinion here. But I'll state my opinion of this. This is an excellent plan. I'm all for it, and if you need a motion to approve it and recommend it to the council, I so move.
Before we accept that, were there any other questions, comments? If not, we have a motion to approve this draft plan for.
Second.
It's moved in second. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Jake.
Thank you. There might be like a handful of changes, 3 or 4, if staff has them, and we would convey those to the town council and you all prior to the meeting to make sure that they're okay with you all and everything, but mostly administrative. And
yeah, mostly administrative. If anything, it would beef up our design criteria. So it would only add more teeth to the plan. It wouldn't detract anything from what we're doing. The general intent and I think the overall plan would remain the same. So.
Just based on the conversation tonight, I made a few notes that we would just want to kind of reinforce some of the things that we're shooting for there.
All right, thank you for your work.
Thanks.
And thank you for our board members who served on that committee as well. All right, staff report.
I don't really have a whole lot for you. I got my staff report in your agenda packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have in relation to that. We're staying really busy right now. Obviously, this is taking a lot of our time on staff level. So I'm kind of excited to be able to take a breath once we get through this. But we were getting a lot of movement on the ground. We've got some more development coming up, I know, so you guys will see that next month. But other than that, I'll answer any questions you guys have for me.
I do have a question, Brian. If this is approved by the by the town council, in the future, isn't it true that the zoning ordinance is going to have to be looked at seriously?
Yes. So, I mean, obviously, and that's one of the first slides I showed you. This will be a tool that we would use to overhaul the zoning ordinance. And that's where we would get our real teeth from. Our enforcement regulations would be the zoning ordinance. So obviously, the Winterville, the comprehensive land use plan is a policy statement. That's exactly what we're talking about, is getting that in line so we can actually pass our ordinances to cast our vision and make sure that we're guiding the growth of the town. So. But that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any comments from the board? If there be none, I accept the motion to adjourn. It's been moved. And seconded. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? You're welcome to stay.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. Yeah, so you